Hi, everyone. Right now, life is doing a lot. Life is lifing, and you don't even have to turn on your television to feel it. Although, if you are not moderating your news consumption, you are definitely feeling it. And when you add on top of that job stress, it can feel like too much to handle. And so today I'm joined by two brilliant women who are going to talk about what it means to step out of survival mode and into work, rest, and life that aligns with who you are. I'm Giovanna May Reese, and I am a certified breath coach, mindfulness expert who helps overwhelmed women gain clarity through mindfulness techniques. Let me bring on my guests. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so happy that you are here to talk to us today. We're going to be talking about burnout, work, how to pivot out of a job that's no longer serving you, and what rest looks like for Black women, and of course, the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black women. But first, I want you to take a moment to introduce yourselves. So, Dr. Kimani, let's start with you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Kimani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist of over 20 years. I'm also a toxic job survivor, but more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. I'm the co host or the co founder of the second annual Job Liberation Virtual Summit with Marissa Price. And so excited to share that with you. And thank you, Giovanna, again for the invitation to be here today.
Marissa, go ahead.
Yeah. I am Marissa Price. I am a healing practitioner helping highly sensitive Black women heal from traumatic work experiences. And so, yeah, I share a lot about that on my channel, Marissa Price Heals. And I'm also the co founder of the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black women coming up May 16th through 18th. And yeah, we're very excited to have Giovanna as a featured speaker leading a breathwork session, which is so important, especially during these times.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Thank you for having me. So I want to start with talking about. We talk a lot about how these toxic jobs can affect us, and even if your job isn't toxic, just having a lot of stress and going back to your own stories, because both of you have survived this situation. Marissa, can you start and talk to us about how did it feel in your body when you knew it was time to go? Like what kind of put it into perspective for listeners?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of the symptoms can be like insomnia, loss of appetite, right? Feeling like you don't want to log on or go into the workplace, not feeling like you want to engage in activities that used to bring you joy, kind of feeling yourself spiral down, like anxiety, depression, right? That can cause self doubt, which is so common for us in these toxic workplaces. We come in like really confident about our skill
Mhm.
sets, and then over a process like of being in that job, right, we start to question everything that we came in with, all of our skills, all of our abilities, all of our gifts. And so that can lead to like serious effects on the body, right? When you start to question, especially like your intuition, your gifts, that can show up in various ways in the body. And I think really like tuning in to, am I holding my breath, right? Am I experiencing muscle tension? Am I experiencing, like, I know that I would experience like heat kind of in my chest when I was in these situations, experiences. And so these are very important clues that our bodies are giving us that this is a traumatic environment. And I think the message that we're taught is that we just have to endure. We just have to stay, right? This is just part of work culture, especially in the US for Black women. And I think the purpose of the summit is like pushing back on that idea. Like, no, right? It's not what we should expect. We should not be expect to be harmed over and over and over again in these jobs because this is a matter of like shortening our lifespans often as Black women. And so we're reclaiming our power, we're reclaiming our gifts, and actually like tuning into the signals that your body is giving you by making a log, by doing something like voice noting when you're in these experiences so that you can have that proof for yourself can be a very helpful way of giving the information to then make your exit strategy, your pivot strategy, which we'll be talking about at the summit.
Okay, yes, definitely. Dr. Kimani, would you add anything to that?
I would completely just say that that was my experience when I was at a toxic job. Towards the end, when it was getting really, I said the peak of it, difficulty sleeping. I would wake up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning in like a panic, like trying to catch my breath. I couldn't catch every day. And so, really paying attention to what those symptoms are. So, physical symptoms, I've talked about that a lot on my YouTube channel, which is Lifting as We Climb Consulting Wellness Services, where I've talked about ways that not only the difficulty sleeping, but also weight gain. I had a lot of weight gain, and it was the stress, but it was also the comfort eating that was involved with that. My blood pressure started going up. I mentioned earlier today, I love both your hair. I was saying, like, people are like, I don't even see your hair anymore. What's up with that? Because I got braids, towards the end of the time I was at that toxic job because my hair was falling out so badly. Now I just love braids, so I just wear them all the time. But hair falling out, really bad nosebleeds. And so I was having so many different physical symptoms. And because I was in therapy, I was able to talk about what was going on with me in addition to the psychological symptoms. So the sadness, the anxiety, the dread of going to work, the fear of I can't leave this job because I can't replace my income, or the thought that I couldn't replace my income, which was not true. But that was an irrational thought that I had because of the social programming that we have as Black women, that we get these good jobs with good benefits and we stay there, we stick it out, we fight. So all those things was making me very sick, and just being just so determined to really stay for the mission of the work, being committed to the work. But then it had to get to a certain point where I said I have to prioritize my own health and my own family before this toxic job.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice those things? Did you notice it all at once, or was it just kind of a slow creep?
No, I
When
did
it
not. I did not, which is so interesting because I am very aware of myself and I self assess all the time. But I wasn't aware of, why am I gaining weight? Like, why am I eating more chocolate at work? What's going on here? Why am I having these difficulties? I didn't make the connection. And in fact, it was my hairdresser who really helped me pause for a moment, because I used to get my hair done every 2 weeks. And so I would go in and she was like, what is going on with your hair? Like, what products are you using? Like, your hair is breaking off really bad. And we couldn't figure out what it was because I kept, no, I'm using the same product. I don't get it. I don't get it. But when you start putting the pieces together, it was the stress. It was the
Mhm.
stress from that job. And so now my hair is regrown, but of course I like the braids. But, again, it was like a slow moving train. You don't really pay attention to it until you have somebody who's able to help you pause and say, wait a minute, you're experiencing all these symptoms. Let's identify, when did the symptoms start, right?
Mhm.
And let's look at what are all the factors that may be contributing to why you are having this experience. And the common issue was the job. So the worse that things got at the job, the more symptoms I started experiencing. And
Yeah, and I
especially an objective person who can reality test with you. Because again, it was like a slow moving train. I mean, I'm like, I guess I'm just gaining weight, or I guess my hair's falling out, or I guess, just
mhm.
kind of blood pressure's going up, all these different things, but not taking a moment to say, wait a minute, these are a lot of very serious symptoms. I was having like profuse nosebleeds, never had nosebleeds ever in my life, but having profuse nosebleeds and could not figure out what it was. But that's why it's so important to really pay attention to your body and to pause a reality test with an objective person who could say, wait a minute, let's look at what's going on with you.
That is so true. And I definitely, resonate with that. And my fellow educators can resonate, I'm sure, with all of the stress, when you're in a helping field. But I remember blood pressure going up, weight gain, and just thinking, oh, I'm getting older. I guess, this is just my life now.
Right.
And, I even look back now because hindsight is 2020. And I remember sometimes going to work and just being in a zone and then looking down and realizing that I was white knuckling the steering. Like, I was just gripping the steering wheel so tightly because my mind was just thinking about all of the things and all of the stress that I was going to have to deal with, and just being tense all the time.
The
I think
anticipatory anxiety.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I just remembered this. I had to go to the doctor once. I think I've talked about it before because my neck locked up. I was so tense, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Your tendons feel like bones." Like I had to get on muscle relaxers. I couldn't turn my neck. Like I had to do this for a minute until the muscle relaxers kicked in because I just had so much stress going on here. So yeah.
Something else too, Giovanna. That something that was happening to me was the job started paralleling earlier traumas I've had in my life. So the job became like a trauma trigger that took power and control and people harming me and not caring about it. So it was like a parallel. And so I was being re-traumatized by the dynamic that was going on with the job. And then, it's like when it rains, it pours, that there were other things going on in my life at the same time that I was in the toxic job. So it just felt just so overwhelming. And it felt like I just can't catch my breath. That's why I was waking up 4 o'clock every morning, like clockwork.
Oh my goodness. So, Dr. Kimani, you mentioned a few minutes ago the story that you were telling yourself about not being able to replace your income. So what kind of stories were you either told or you told yourself about staying in this good job?
Yeah. Well, initially the job actually was a good job, right? So it started off very good. I had wonderful supervisors. I had 2 Black women. I'm still connected to them now. But when they retired, I had a sense like, I think I'm going to be in trouble because they were not able to buffer me from that toxic system. The system was always toxic, but they were able to buffer me in some ways. So when they left, I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And in fact, I was in trouble. Okay. And, it started off good. And, I was working for the school district too. So it was great because I had, the breaks off. It worked well with my kids and their schedule. And it worked well until it didn't work well, until all these negative things started happening to me. And then it became, wait a minute, this was a job that worked very well for me at the beginning. Like what happened? So kind of letting go of the dream of what was, it no longer was, it became a nightmare. It was a true nightmare. So letting go of that, like it's no longer what it used to be. Also having people around me, and I think because I'm Gen X, that message was ingrained. Yeah, the message was ingrained that you get the good job with the good benefits and you stay there till you retire and you get that pension, because my mother was a government worker. And so she retired well. And so that was taught to me that is what you do. And so from there, I started thinking, wait a minute, I'm walking away from this good job with the good benefits. What am I doing? And then because I'd never seen somebody do that, then I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do to replace my income? Because I've been here at this point almost like 12 years. So what am I going to do to replace my income? Which was a lie, Giovanna, because before I was at that job, I was a licensed clinical psychologist. So I was already had my PhD, already licensed, had previous jobs before as a licensed clinical psychologist, right? But the lie I was telling myself was, there's no way I could leave this job and make good money and still, have benefits. And so that is what kept me. The fear of leaving is what kept me there longer, way past expiration date.
Yeah. And Marissa, I'd ask you the same thing. Like, what was it that you were telling yourself that made you maybe stay longer than you should have?
I think it was a lot of the same things. Like I had poured a lot of education, a lot of internships, unpaid labor and internships as a whole of the story, into this field, right? Into what I thought was going to be my dream job. And then having like this title at such a young age too felt like a lot of pressure for me to stay and just be grateful for this job, which I think a lot of us experience. And so it felt like handcuffs, right? It felt like I couldn't leave because this was supposed to be the key to happiness. That's like all the messages that we received, just find the dream job, right? And then everything else will fall into place. I was trying to force so many things. And like reflecting back, like just like how much that job had like broken me down in so many ways, right? So with all the messaging like coming at you, it can be very confusing to stay like committed and rooted in how you're actually feeling. And that's why something like breath work and like being attuned to your body, how is your body experiencing this environment, is so key, because we have been taught from such a young age to ignore our body's signals. And as Dr. Kimani mentioned, like the parallels between what I experienced in this job and childhood trauma, childhood bullying, it was like it felt like the same environment that I had entered back into. And so that also created feelings of I can't leave, because I couldn't leave as a child, right? And that's why we talk a lot about how childhood trauma can like prime us for these environments. And so it was a process of slowly over time, as Dr. Kimani mentioned, like it wasn't at one point that I just had this epiphany. It was slowly like getting the building blocks over time. A lot of it was being in community with other Black women, like reflecting back to me their experiences, and also that nothing was wrong with me, right? And the more that we're able to like build up that sense of self, we're able to see that we don't deserve to be harmed, right? We're not here to be mistreated, no matter what benefits the job is providing. You should be well, and that should be a non-negotiable. So yeah, those are some of the messages I was telling myself.
Yeah. And I wanted to add another thing too, because we're talking about all the things that kind of kept us there. Was at that point at the job, it was like I was committed to the so-called mission. Well, I thought was the mission of the institution or the organization, which clearly was not. They clearly were not dedicated in a way that they said they were. But because I was so committed to really advocating for Black students, I became this embodiment in some ways of Harriet Tubman. And I would even call myself Harriet Tubman at the job. So I was known, other people would come to me, well, you're Harriet Tubman, girl. How are we going to figure out how to help these students? What are we going to do? Which is crazy already. That shows you how problematic that environment was, that we would have to think about being on the Underground Railroad, and it's supposed to be the whole school district, right, for Black students. But I digress. But anyway, so I became Harriet Tubman at the job, right? So I became like, oh, I'm going to fight these people, and we're going to find ways to support these Black students, and we're going to do this. And then it expanded to, how do we support Black families? Okay, so what we're going to do, Then it expanded to Black staff. Okay, so what we're going to, but then I took that on. So I felt, again, lying to myself, I felt that if I left, who else was going to do this work, right? If I wasn't tirelessly fighting for the rights or the needs for Black students, particularly mental health needs, what was going to happen? So that kept me there longer. And when all these demeaning things started happening to me at that job, and they were trying to push me out, I took it. Right? It's like they beat me, and I still took it. Okay, I'll take it as long as I can do this to try to help the Black students. Lying to myself, because it's no way. They were not even allowing me to do that. I've talked a lot about my YouTube channel, particularly like my behind the scenes, the members only. I talk really in depth about ways that they were not even allowing me to do that work. So I'm thinking mission driven, I'm going to fight. I'll take it. But they're undermining me at every turn. It would be no way for me to even do the work. So what was the point of staying? And I had to let that go. I had to let it go. So that was part of the grief process that I experienced after I left the toxic job. Was I really am so sad that a lot of the work that I did there, I had to say goodbye to that, because they weren't going to let me finish the work anyway.
Yeah, and that is a grieving process when you're in a job and your mission is to actually help.
Yes.
You believe in the mission, and so you do take on so much.
Yeah.
So I know, for me, when I left my position as a principal and I moved here to Brunei in Southeast Asia, it was a hiatus for me, and that's the inspiration, for the hiatus phase, is just taking a pause, taking a beat. To reflect and to rest. And for the last 2 years that I've been here, it's allowed me to reflect, to get in touch with some things, and to return to that position soon, in a place where I'm better aligned. And so I want to know, for both of you, Marissa, what role has rest played in your journey, your healing journey?
Wow, that's a really great question. It's played a pivotal role. And I kind of feel the same way. Like I was I was an overachiever, right? For all of my life, like straight A student, like more academic credentials, more certifications. And this job really like, I don't know, put me into like a spiritual awakening, right? Where I had to realize that I'm already enough. Seeking externally constantly like exhausts us. It
Mm.
depletes us. And so I really had to turn inward to do deep healing after that experience. Like you said, taking a pause, not trying to outdo, right, overwork myself all the time and really like pull back and come into who I always was and like really reclaim those parts of myself, which I talk about. Like I have a book called Cocoon, Affirmations for Transformation. And that was a series of like spiritual downloads that I received while I was in that job, while I was trying to process what was happening to me, as the path was kind of being laid out in front of me of where to go, because I was so like lost at a certain point. And just having a rooting that I have everything within me already. I have the answers within me. And rest really has played a pivotal role in me being able to access those answers and like ancestral guidance, right? Really deep knowing of the systems that we live in, what we're navigating as Black women in the workplace. And this has been over a period of centuries, right? Black women's labor, that can be a whole other discussion, right? What we have endured, especially in the US. And so, yeah, rest has been pivotal. And I think it will allow me to access further realizations as I continue on this journey.
Thank you for that. And Kamani, what about you? How has rest supported you?
Well, my rest has looked a lot like boundary setting too.
Mhm.
So when I was exiting out that toxic job, I was very clear that there were certain people at that job who betrayed me in certain ways. And so I did a purge out of my phone. So for me, I had to immediately set boundaries, purge out of my phone, like don't contact me. I recently did a video, dear colleagues, dear former colleagues, because some of them, those same people who betrayed me are circling back to me now and like looking at me on LinkedIn, all kind of stuff, right? So boundaries, right? So that's been a big part of me having that peace of mind in some ways, not just a physical rest, but just that peace of mind that I'm very protective now of who is in my circle, who has access to me. The other thing is that I became very intentional about making my home a sanctuary space. Okay. So that meant that to this day, the workplace bully, her name is not allowed in my home. Okay.
Mhm.
So we can say she or we get whatever, but she is not allowed in this space because this is my sanctuary space. So that boundary. The other thing that I did, which has been very therapeutic for me in terms of reclaiming my sanity, my mind, my peace, has been I created a garden. So my husband and I created a garden at home. And so it was literally like we had to clear out all the weeds and stuff, which is symbolic. So clear
Mm.
all the weeds out of your life, just like that toxic job, clearing out the weeds. And now I have a garden where I plant and I eat the food. I have collards and kale and so many different things there, right? Got a peach tree, a lemon tree, all these different things that before being at the toxic job, we didn't really think about it doing a garden, but being more intentional. So that's my happy place. So even now with planning the summit, I tell Marissa, girl, I need to go in my garden. I need to regroup. So that has been an ongoing part of my healing is to connect to the earth. And we talk about ancestral healing. That is very ancestral healing for me because I think about our ancestors who worked the land but didn't
Mhm.
own the land and really couldn't benefit from, the fruits of our labor. So gardening has been a very big part of my healing.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting when we rest, we're
Hmm.
re-energizing ourselves.
Absolutely.
When we're in these jobs that aren't aligned, that are pulling from us, we don't have the energy to do anything, even rest.
Right.
Even rest. But once we allow ourselves to do that, it energizes us so that we can do the things that nourish us,
Mhm.
And Marissa, you were talking about our ancestors, and being in community with people so that there's nothing wrong with you, being aware of those systems and being aware of everything that is set up to work against us, it does help you feel less. Am I crazy? No, you're not crazy.
Not crazy. No.
You're not crazy.
Crazy making. It is crazy making, right? So to be able to call a thing and to name it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as a therapist, Dr. Kimani, and as a certified yoga teacher now,
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you talk about how yoga and breath work can offer Black women comfort, healing when they're recovering from toxic work environments, or just even going through a rough patch in their work life?
Yes, absolutely. So first, it grounds us in the here and now. So when we think about everything that we're juggling as Black women, and we got to be this for this person, it allows us to center ourselves and be intentional about that, right? And to connect our bodies, because we're so busy, we're running around all the time. And I tell Black women in my therapy work and my coaching work that being busy all the time, that's a trauma response. So when we're able to slow down and pause, if we do breath work or yoga, you're connected to yourself. So that way you can really listen to what is your body saying to you? What is your soul saying to you? Is your soul saying to you, I'm exhausted? Is it saying, I'm restless here, I'm unhappy here? So that way you can't lie to yourself anymore. So the grounding is very important. Also, really being able to really think about and reflect on your internal resources. So when you're around all this negativity, there's so many things trying to tell us as Black women what we can't do, what we're not good in, that with all that negativity, right? So breath work, yoga allows for us to really cultivate within us and know, what are my talents? What are my gifts? And how do I protect that inner light, even though all these things around me are trying to extinguish that light? So how do I recognize my light, and how do I cultivate that? And what are the things I need to put in place in my life to protect my life? So I'm also in the process of becoming an Afroflow yoga teacher. So during the summit, Antoinette and I, so we're both in training to become Afroflow yoga teachers. We're going to be actually doing an Afroflow yoga session at the summit, the virtual summit, to really help Black women connect to our light and release all that negative energy around us, all that chatter, and center ourselves and do things that really protects and lets our light fully shine. And when we think about breath work, yoga, Afroflow yoga, these are cultural forms of healing. And many of us have gotten disconnected from our cultural forms of healing. So we're talking about ways to reconnect to that during your session, during my session, during Marissa's training sessions. All these things are a way to help Black women recenter ourselves and really know our worth. Know our worth. And when you know your worth, then you know you deserve better. So if you're in a situation you're questioning, well, why do they treat me like this? And that's part of my work as a therapist, is that I'm now seeing patterns in my therapy sessions with Black women. I'm hearing patterns of things that are happening, right? Questioning, oh, what's wrong with me? Why would they be treating me this way if I'm so qualified? Why would they be treating me this way? Why are other people getting away with stuff? And I'm trying to look out for everybody, but nobody's looking out for me. Or, you know what? I need to stay because I got to stay here for the kids I'm working with. I got to stay for my team, because I'm a dedicated leader. But sis, what about you? What about you? So really taking time to say the boundary is self-preservation comes before anything else. So yes, you can be driven to your mission, you can be driven to helping other people, but if you're not well, if you're broken, then you really cannot help other people. And so it's okay for us as Black women to say, I need to center myself and prioritize myself. That is not selfish. That is not selfish, right? So quoting Audre Lorde, self-care is self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare. That was a paraphrase. But we have to think about ways, and I even think about this time right now of chaos and confusion, us being well, that is a form of resistance, because these situations, these people, these jobs, this society is trying to break us down. So for us to still be well, in spite of all this nonsense, we will be well, but we have to be intentional about it and do things that really protect our own wellness.
Yeah, well, so well said, so well said. And I, definitely resonated when you said being busy is a trauma response. Like I remember, like on top, the queen of certifications and going back to school. And it's so ingrained that even after you've done your work, because of course it's a journey, sometimes I catch myself, I'm like, oh, I could get certified in this and I could get certified. No, you don't need to do all of that,
No
right?
one. You're good
And
enough. You're inherently worthy.
yeah. I saw a woman, a Black therapist on Instagram. You just reminded me, and she said, for Black women who are depressed, a lot of times it looks like, them going back to school, right?
Yeah.
Like you're down, you're depressed. Black women will be in complete depression and going back to get a PhD or going back to get something else, and it's because we can be so disconnected from ourselves and our bodies and our wants and our needs. And doing those mindfulness practices, doing breath work, doing yoga allows us the stillness to just listen to what it is we really need.
Yes.
And can you speak to what you might say to Black women who do feel guilty for resting or think they have to earn it? Like, I'll do that when I've earned it, whether they say that explicitly or just through their actions. What would you say?
Well, first, I would say, who told you that? Right? Where'd you get that message from? Because we are often looking at our mothers, our grandmothers, to see how they operated. So really looking at what models did you have in your life? What were the messages that you received about work, the workplace, and jobs? So many times it has been, again, you get that good job, the good benefits, and you stay and you work and you work and work, right? And then you extend yourself to everybody else and you prioritize yourself last. And if you get rest, you get rest, but you should really center rest. Who told you that? Did that serve them? That's the next question. Did that serve them? Were they happy in their lives? Do you want to continue down that path? Because the other thing is, even though we were taught that way of being, we can disrupt that. We don't always have to be the way that we were brought up. We can shift, we can pivot. And so asking, okay, when you grew up and you saw your mother being broke down by that job, when you saw your mother overextending herself and had no time for herself and she was miserable, is that how you want to live your life? Okay. And if it's not, then let's talk about what is the life you want for yourself and how do we work together to create that? That's the key part, is you need to recognize, where did I get that message from? Did that serve them? And do I want to continue living that life? And if not, then a willingness to look at, okay, so what is it that I want and how do I get there?
Yeah.
It's a lot of social programming. And not only how we were brought up, what were the messages we received in our churches, in our communities, in our friend groups. So it's often reinforced. So that's why it becomes so ingrained that we think that we have to stay this way. But we don't. We don't. That we have different options available to us.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about how trauma can play a role in the way that we, show up in our adult lives, in our work, the things that we take, the things that we don't take. Marissa, can you talk about how, in the work that you've been doing with helping women heal from trauma, what kind of shifts have you seen in women once they finally have the space to connect with themselves and slow down and start to process?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest shifts is learning not to internalize, right, systemic oppression, which is easier said than done, right, because we're all operating within multiple systems of oppression, right, every single day that we step out. But it's rejecting internalizing what you're experiencing on the outside, right, and really protecting and safeguarding the sacred parts of yourself. Because often in these work environments, they will try to break us down, right? Seasoning is a term that's popping up for me during enslavement, right? Literally like psychologically breaking people down so that you can do whatever you want, right? That's like the purpose of seasoning during enslavement. And we see the same pattern occurring in toxic jobs. The external treatment that we're experiencing, then we start to turn it inward on ourselves. We start to break ourselves down, question ourselves, doubt our abilities, our skills. And so that has been one of the most profound shifts that I've witnessed, like my clients experience. Just realizing that no, it is the environment, it is the systems literally trying to make you question yourself. But if you can build like an internal barrier, like almost like a force field around yourself, if you still have to be in that environment as you're making your exit plan, because sometimes it takes a minute, right, to make that plan. But you now have a shield that you're realizing that this is not you, right? What your experience is not a result of what you're doing or not doing. It is literally a systemic oppression trying to make you get in your mind often and make you like doubt yourself, doubt your skills, your abilities that you came in with, make you shrink all these things that we experience, right? Tone policing, microaggressions in the workplace. And so if you can make that shift internally and guard yourself internally, and literally put what you're experiencing back into the environment, you can like, that's such a pathway for healing, right?
Yeah.
Because now you realize that nothing was ever wrong with you. It was literally the environment. It sounds simple, but it was it, right? It was the environment.
Marissa, I'm so appreciative of what you just said, because it really ties in that social historical framework that we need to look at in terms of work environments, because every environment we go in, it has the vestiges of white supremacy in it. So when we think about enslavement and what our experiences were, there's so many different parallels. So that kind of like putting us in our place. So don't get too big. Don't, because we're gonna put you down your place. You better watch yourself. You better watch yourself. So all these different dynamics are still happening in the workplace, but I think we just lie to ourselves again, like, oh, all jobs are like that. So you just gotta play the game. You just gotta, and I say no, not all workplaces are like that. A lot of them are, but not all of them are like that way. And so how do we come to a place where we're able to acknowledge and recognize when these things are happening, these dynamics, and say, okay, boom, recognize it, clocked it. Okay. So I will still do my job, and I will also start looking at my options too, because I don't want us to feel stuck in any environment because we think there's no other way for us to make money or get our health insurance or retirement. I don't want us to think that way, but I think a lot of us become stuck because of that mentality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's, one of the things that we'll talk about later with the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women is providing resources so that people know that that is not true. You have so many options. So many options.
Yes.
So as we're doing the work to kind of unravel ourselves from certain ways of thinking, because we've been thinking this way for so long, and we've been taking in these messages from these systems that are all around us. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, every now and again, you get kind of roped back in, you just kind of get pulled back in. What tools would you ladies suggest, or what tools do you personally return to when you feel either overwhelmed or you feel activated or triggered by something?
Well, first, I just acknowledge, like, okay, what's going on right now? Like, how do I feel, right? What's contributing to why I feel this way? Are there any reminders to that previous job that I'm having? Because once I left the job, that's when my healing actually started. There still are trauma triggers that I have to that job. Even if it's thinking about, you know what, I saw a group of a lot of Black kids going into school today. And as I was driving, I was like, those Black babies, I love those babies. But it was also sad for me because I'm no longer working with that population. So I have to say, you know what? I'm not working in that capacity yet. I am now doing work where I'm able to help more Black kids and all kids on a higher level now that I've left that job. So I had to remind myself, yes, that was unfortunate. Yes, you went through that. But guess what? You're still helping kids. but maybe not in that capacity. So that reframe is very important. And also reminding myself that things would have not been any better for me if I would have stayed at that job. It would have gotten worse and worse. It would have gotten progressively worse, right? And I know that because people, black, white, whatever, are reaching out to me and telling me how horrible it is. I already know that. I already know that it hasn't gotten any better. Right. It's not any better. Not that I get any pleasure out of that at all, because I don't like to hear anybody suffering. I don't. However, it's confirmation for me that I made the right decision, right? And recognizing that it wasn't a situation where I'm like, oh, that job was horrible. I hated it. It was terrible. It's a nuanced understanding of my experience at that job. There are parts about that job I absolutely appreciate it. I appreciated so many wonderful people that I met at that job. I appreciate all the experiences I got at the job. I got my student loans forgiven because I worked at that job. So there are a lot of things that I got from that job. But it got to a certain point where the costs outweighed the benefits. And so when I have these reminders about the job, I have to remind myself, no, there were a lot of costs that I experienced. And the other thing, Giovanna, is that I was asked to come back. I was asked to come back to that job, right? And even though it felt enticing because they were trying to sell me on, well, you'll be able to work with the Black students like you wanted to. Like, you'll be able to do these things in a different department, so you won't have to deal with those other people. But I'd say, no, because it's still part of the toxic system. And I want no part of that. And so being able to say, you know what, I appreciate the work that I did there, but I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back there because there's too many trauma triggers about that toxic system. And I have to think about how can I affect change on a higher level in a different capacity, but still not regretting, a lot of the very positive experiences I had there. But no, do I want to go back? No, absolutely not. Never.
Yeah, and it's so complicated and complex when you are working in a helping industry, right?
Yeah.
Because even for myself, my previous job wasn't terrible. Like, I worked with great people. Great people, and they were working hard. And we know that the educational system has a lot of challenges, and people were doing the best that they could. But it's that you have to come to a certain point where you're putting your own oxygen mask on.
Absolutely.
Or you're putting on your own life vest. And to take care of yourself, because you're no good to anyone if you are not healthy, broke down, miserable.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so, definitely. So we're going to be talking a lot about how to put on your own oxygen mask, your own life jacket at the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women. So can you talk about why this summit is so necessary for Black women right now?
I think what we're seeing with, especially like the layoffs that have impacted Black women disproportionately. Women who have poured their hearts, their souls, talents, many years into jobs that we were all told were supposed to be stable, right, for decades. And we see it just like the rug being pulled out from so many of us. And so to realize that your skills are what's permanent, right? Even if the job goes away, the skills that you've worked to hone over time, the gifts that you have, the talents, those go with you in any environment that you go in. If you go to another job, if you retire early, if you go into entrepreneurship, those are what are permanent, right, within us. And I think the Job Liberation Virtual Summit really does. We have so many sessions on how to reclaim your skill set, lean into your power, right? Things that may scare us, like how to revise your resume. We have sessions that are intentionally curated for Black women, especially at this stage, what we see happening in the economy, right? It's really important to realize that no matter what's happening externally, because we have seen this happen before, right? These shifts that occur that we don't have control over. But if you can lean into what's inside you and really hold on to that. Know that whatever environment you go into, if you have to do a bridge job, which we've talked about before, right? Giving yourself that flexibility to experiment with different options, but knowing that toxicity is not your only option, even though that's what's being sold to us, especially at this time. I feel like the message has intensified. That we just have to stay and be traumatized and be grateful for whatever we have, or pushing back against that narrative. No, because we have over 20 Black women speakers coming to share with you literally different options that you can pivot into. And if it takes a second, because I know that both Dr. Kimani and I, right, it took us like a year plus to make our exit plans, our exit strategies. But that's why replays are available for the summit, right? If it does take you time to put together your strategy, the resources are there for you. And no matter what's happening externally, hold on to your skill set, hold on to your talents, your gifts, and know that you always have the power to pivot, as we have demonstrated as Black women over centuries.
Yeah, so
many times. Yeah.
And to learn from other Black women who have done the thing, who have pivoted out of situations, whether it be layoff or they decided they no longer want to be in that job, or they want to have multiple streams of income. But to talk about the practical parts also about what to do about your health insurance, what to do about your retirement. How do you have multiple streams of income so you're not so reliant on just that one source of income? So there's resources available to us, even if you decide, you know what, I don't think I want to leave this job right now, or maybe I still have the job, but always having the resources so you're ready. As Black women, we need to be ready, particularly during this time. We need to be ready. And I also want to mention, as a privacy consideration, that the summit attendees will not be on camera. Their names won't be listed. So nobody will be in your business about if you come to the summit. Only the summit speakers will be on camera. And as Marissa said, it is recorded. So if you're not able to come some of the time, it's recorded so you can go back and see it later.
Yeah. And, you know, one of my favorite sayings is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Like I live by the motto, I stay ready so I don't have to get ready.
That's right.
And so even if you are not looking right now to move, this job summit is it's right on time for the times that we are in right now, but it is also always on time, because you always need to be prepared for shifts, you know, and have the confidence that you can navigate things that come at you in the workplace, you know, if you do need to make a pivot. And so I definitely think, you know, whether you are looking right now to make a pivot, or you're just kind of, you know, maybe, you know, there's lots of resources here for you if you're looking for extra streams of income, because I'm also the queen of having multiple streams of income as well. You know, you never know. And so what are each of you excited? Like, what thing are you most excited to talk about at the summit?
You know, I'm just excited to be in community with that many Black women. So last year we had 300 Black women in attendance, and just that energy, it's like magnetic, like just to be around that many Black women, and the chat is like rolling. It's like, oh my God, me too, me too, me too. And to know that Marissa and I have provided and created something that is really helping to liberate so many Black women around the world. That brings us joy. Like doing the summit work, for the prep, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But being there and feeling that energy and knowing that and hearing from Black women who are like fired up, right? So they may have come in defeated and broke down and oh my God, and what was me, all that kind of stuff. By the time we're like halfway to the summit, they are fired up and they're like, okay, I got this. Point taken. Thank you so much. I know what to do. Like that part is what kind of fuels the energy to keep going on and doing this work. This is true liberation work, right? When I thought I was hearing for the job, I was lying to myself again, right? No, this is true liberation work. Being able to show Black women there's another way. They can see what Marissa has done, what I have done, all the Black women speakers, they can see what we have done. And we're also lifting as we're climbing, as we're moving forward. We're all moving together at one time. And to also say that once you have the information, nobody can take it away from you. Now you're informed. Now you're prepared. Now you can do what you want to do on your terms, on your own timeline, and taking that power back. Because when we're in a toxic job or we've had a sudden job loss, we feel like we're powerless. We feel helpless. We feel, right? all these different things. But this allows us to take our power back so we can make the decisions we want for our own lives when we want to make those changes.
Yes, yes, I love that. So, what do you hope that women walk away believing? I'm sorry, Marissa, did you? I'm just like all over the
Oh,
place. Did
no,
you
you're
hear what
fine.
you're most excited about?
I was going to say the same thing, community, right? Just the chance
Yeah.
to be able to pour back into each other, especially
Mhm.
during these times. Ooh, it feels like there are so many campaigns against Black women specifically during
Yeah.
these times that having a safe space, again, with the privacy considerations, if you want to attend completely anonymously, please feel free to do so. There's an option to change your name on the Summit platform after you register. But being able to pour into each other collectively, and this is a global movement. We've had Black women attend from different countries, right? And just to see that and hear the feedback that it has changed people's lives, right? People have decided to make their exit strategy from a toxic work environment, to pursue something like FMLA, right? Which I did. I took 11 weeks of FMLA from that toxic job to rest, something we talked
Yeah.
about, so
Yeah.
that I could start my exit plan because I couldn't even like envision the path forward while I was still there.
Yeah.
So knowing that you have tangible resources and Black women who have already done it to share with you their roadmap so that you don't have to start from scratch, because trying to do so while you are overwhelmed, being traumatized, it can feel impossible. And so
Yeah.
having that in one place and being able to reflect back to each other, it's not you over and over again. It
Yeah.
does something for your sense of self-worth and
It
self-confidence.
validates.
Right. And like Dr. Kimani said, like even after like in the first day, people are like, okay, I got it. Like I'm ready to make my strategy now
Yeah.
that I've been poured into, because so often we're the ones pouring into other people.
So
Right.
true.
And so to be able to do that for each other is so special.
Yes.
Right, right. And definitely, I agree, the community is the most valuable part of it, and so many of the women who come to these summits, and myself included, I'm an introvert. And so you live your life kind of in your own little silo, but once you get into community, it's just magical being around other Black women and sharing and supporting each other.
And let me just say, we heal in community. That's a key part of our healing, is to heal in community.
Yeah, definitely. You can feel that. So what do you hope women walk away from the summit believing about themselves?
Believing that, knowing that they're not alone, right? They're not the only one having this toxic work environment. And I've heard this so many times from my therapy clients. I thought I was the only one. Girl, no, you're not the only one. My coaching class, no, you're not the only one. Okay. My YouTube, no, you're not the only one. Okay. So that you're not alone. Two is that we have options, right? Because when you're broke down and they're beating you down, you're trying to protect yourself all the time, you feel like you don't have options. Okay. You do have options, and we're going to share what those options are for you. And number three, that you have agency. Okay. We may have seen our mothers, our grandmothers do things because felt that they didn't have agency. We have agency. We're in a very different situation right now. We have agency, but we have to apply what we're learning. And you're learning from other Black women who have gone through things. So yeah, you can try to Google it, you can try to YouTube, all these different things, but you're going to spend a lot of time. Okay. So this really shortcuts the process. Again, gives you a blueprint of what you need to do to get your exit plan together. Or if you've already left a job, layoff or retirement, whatever other things that have happened to you, you're able to pivot into whatever you want to do professionally, better opportunities, and still be able to replace your income, know what to do about your health insurance, your retirement, and all the things so you can live a life that you want and that you deserve.
Yeah. Marissa, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's so important, because we're often taught we just have to settle, right? We have to settle for whatever like life path is given to us, and to know that you have the freedom to choose. And there are all these options that lay before you, because when you are in a toxic work environment, I've talked about this on my channel, but it can feel like tunnel vision. That this is the only thing you will ever do. You can't pivot. You don't have the skills that you came in with. This is it. And Dr. Kimani has talked about this before, like the impact of trauma on the brain, right? The survival response that we're in a lot of these jobs does not allow us a space to be able to plan, which I think is an important aspect of the summit too. Once you give yourself space and time to like settle in to your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So you're able to soak in the knowledge that we're giving to people. It's transformative, right? It really is. And just to remind people that you are free. You are free to choose, because so often we're told that we just have to be in these work environments. We have to endure. We have to settle for less. And part of liberation work is really like pushing back on that narrative, realizing that systemic oppression and refusing that, right? The politics of refusal. I'm not settling for this. If it's harming me, I know that there is something better out there for me. And that's the purpose of the summit, to show you the options that exist.
Right. And part of the liberation work too is understanding the why. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel that I have to stay at a particular job? Or why do I feel like now that I've been laid off, everything's going to be a horrible thing? Why do I feel that way? Well, Marissa made reference to it, but I'll just talk about it briefly. There's a biological component to this that we don't really recognize. So when these things happen and we perceive that we're in a dangerous situation, it's like a fight, flight, or freeze response. And many of us are in freeze mode. Like, uh-oh, this environment is crazy. Freeze, let's freeze, right? So when that happens, that part of our survival brain, our amygdala, takes over. So now we're not able to access our prefrontal cortex when we plan, we organize, and we can judge what's going on. So the hope is that when we're at the summit, when everybody's at the summit, they can turn on their survival brain, because you're in a community of supportive Black women who are in a similar situation. You could turn on a survival brain. So now you can access that prefrontal cortex. You can plan. What is it that you want to do? You can organize, and you can use judgment in terms of what best serves you and your family.
Yes, and that's one of the things that inspired me to become certified as a breath coach is, learning how to use that natural process to activate that parasympathetic system so that we can get out of survival mode. Yes. And I'm really looking forward to, showing the Black women who come to the summit or watch the replays just some things that they can do when they are having those heightened feelings of stress to come back down into a place where they can plan and they can think, where that prefrontal cortex isn't shut down.
Right.
Yeah. Can I just speak to that? Like, these are skills that last throughout a lifetime, right?
True.
Breath work that can change your entire life. So this is much bigger than jobs, careers, right? Mm-hmm. It's you. It's like preserving your life for the long term with these skills that we will be providing. And breath work is such an essential part of that.
Great.
Yeah. So before we're getting to the end of our conversation, and I'd like you guys to think about when you were in the thick of it, in these jobs that were not serving you, to kind of go back to that feeling that you had. And if you could go back and tell your past self one thing right before you left that job, what would it be?
I would tell myself, I know that it's scary. I know that you're scared, but girl, you're going to be all right. In fact, you're going to be more than all right. You're going to be phenomenal. You really are. Your life will be so much better once you leave that job, even though it's scary. It's very scary, but I'm telling you, you're going to be more than all right once you leave that job.
Love it. Marissa?
Yeah. And I would say, like, similarly, like the fear, I could just recall like the fear, the uncertainty, the anxiety that I was experiencing, submitting that resignation letter. I would just tell her too, like, you're going to be all right. And you're actually going to be in this community that you could never even imagine, of Black women, right? Pouring into each other, of sharing resources globally. Because I look back, like, over the past 2 years, I never would have thought that this was possible. And that's part of being in a safe community where you're able to take that strategy and implement it, right? New possibilities, new pathways open up that when you're in the thick of it, you can't even envision at the time, because you're, again, in survival mode. Yeah. But once you're able to, like, step out of that, right? Take time to rest, to breathe, to be in safe community, all of these pathways open up and you will find yourself in like, I don't know. I would never imagine like my life would be like this 2 years later, that I would be
Right.
able to work with Dr. Kimani, right?
Yes.
Co-hosting the summit, and just all the possibilities that have opened up for me once I left. I would
Yes,
share
I
that
just
with
want to
her.
co-sign that so much because, in fact, one of my close sister friends was talking to me, and she had actually left the toxic job. So again, sometimes you can meet good friends at a job, right? Just do some discretion. But she had already left the toxic job, but she was trying to encourage me to leave, and she kept talking to me about faith, and she kept pouring
Mm.
into me. And she was like, "Girl, you need to go because I'm telling you, I see so much bigger for you once you leave that job." And other people have been telling me that too, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to hear that. My therapist told me that I see so much bigger for you. I couldn't believe it because I was like, she's like, you got to believe. You have to believe. And so I want to say to Black women, as someone who struggled with that, I really struggled with that for so long. Even during that whole leave of absence, I was gone, getting an exit plan together. I struggled with that. But once I let go, and I walked away and I resigned, so many opportunities start coming my way in a way that I never could have imagined. If somebody would have told me 3, 4 years ago that I would be on YouTube talking about anything about my life, because I'm private, right? I will be on YouTube all the time, talking, interviewing Black women, meeting phenomenal Black women like you and Marissa, meeting, forming my own now a supportive community of Black women around me. I would have said, girl, please, that's not me. I'm not going to be doing that. I don't even want LinkedIn. Like, what are you talking about? Right? So to see the woman that I've become, it's amazing. I never could have envisioned that. But I knew that other people envisioned, they could see things in me that I couldn't see for myself. And so sometimes there might be people around you who see greater for you, even if you don't see it for yourself, and lean into that. Lean into that because a lot of times it's the fear that's telling you, girl, no, just stay. And what you think is safe is not safe. What you think is safe is actually, this is what you're used to. So you might be used to abuse and trauma, but that's not a safe environment for you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for coming on my channel and just sharing. It's always such a good time. You're two of my favorite people to talk to. Everyone, the link for the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women is in the description. So again, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Sign up today. And if you are not already following my channel, I invite you to do that. I often have breathwork practices. I release meditations, and check out my website, thehiatusspace.com. Again, thank you, ladies, and thank you everyone who's watching now and in the future. And I will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Shivana.